Hi, it's Robin. Way back in 1985 or 1986, I went to my local Zellers store and I got this game, Five-A-Side Soccer by Mastertronic. When you're a kid with very little money, a game for $10 seemed like a great deal. So I rode my bike home and loaded up the game. Copy protection. Mastertronic Software presents Five-A-Side Indoor Soccer. Loading, please wait. By the way, this game has lots of different names. I think you'll see 2 or 3 different names even here. On this loading screen, it's called Five-A-Side. No hyphens, only 2 words. That guy looks excited for the ball to be coming at his head. Okay, so my new game is loaded up. Mastertronic Software presents Five-A-Side. I thought it was 3 words or even 5 words. Now it's 2. Play a 1-player game. Easy beginner level. Enter the name of Team 1. Okay, I'll just hit return. Computer play Team 2. Kick off. Well, that's quite the song. I thought that was pretty awesome speech. I'd never heard the computer sing like that before. I'm the blue team, by the way. Whoop. Goal! Wow, what cool speech. This is great. What else does this game have? Oh, another kickoff. Okay, it's that song again. Oh. Oh. Pretty tough game. Okay, kickoff. I hope they have a new song for us. Or how about no song? Can't skip it. By the way, if you're the dark blue players who you control, but the game's not very smart about... Oh. You'll have to be behind the play and... Oh. Okay, so here we go. And by the 3rd or 4th kickoff, I was hating this song and pressing every key. You cannot skip it. Oh, so many times when you check the guy or whatever, you rarely get a foul. But almost always he kicks it again after. It drives me crazy. Okay, your other players, like the AI, is absolutely terrible. Oh. Okay, so only a minute and a half gone. Feels like I've been playing the game forever. Here we go with stupid kickoff song again. Okay. So I actually found this game so annoying that I hardly ever even completed a full game. It took forever. Every time somebody scored, which was almost always the computer against me, you had to wait like 30 seconds to start to play again and listen to that stupid song over and over again. Even if you turned off the volume, You still have to just wait while that thing plays. Really terrible. So that was the memory I had of this game, and I wish there was some way I could skip that terrible, repetitive song that I thought was cool maybe the first 2 times I heard it. Okay, so what I just showed you is accurate to my memory, but I'm not sure it's accurate to facts. Everything you just saw, I hacked together to match my memories. In reality, this is not the copy that I bought at Zellers in 1985. It's actually a copy I got from Dangerous Don, an old local sysop, who called me up summer 2020 to give me some of his stuff in his garage. And I got this from him. I showed it in a donation video a while ago. So thanks again, Don. I've had strong memories of the game being like I showed you, but when I actually loaded this copy up, this is how it is. This is all the same, but watch, or more importantly, listen. No song. Useless goalie. Or keeper if you prefer. He scores. So it still has some speech, like he scores, but whenever you go back to the kickoff, that annoying song is gone. It's like they came to their senses. Oh, finally saved one. Oh. So I was totally shocked that this game is not how I remember, but I had such strong memories of that annoying song that you couldn't skip. So what was I remembering? I looked into it a bit more and found this review by my friend Jason Compton, and that's when I realized there were actually 2 releases of Five-A-Side Soccer. One by Anirog, which has the annoying song, and this one by Mastertronic, which doesn't. So what I was showing you, I hacked together between the 2 versions, just, I don't know, it's part of my story. So our memories are a really weird thing, especially when we're dealing with memories from when we were like 12, 13 years old, 35, 36 years ago. I am doubting those memories, even though they were so clear. My annoyance and the fact that it was a Mastertronic game and how annoyed I was with that stupid song, and yet it doesn't seem to exist in any of the Mastertronic versions I found online. However, maybe Mastertronic did release one version of the game with the original speech, and then for whatever reason, maybe because they thought it was annoying, maybe there were extra licensing fees that they didn't understand about the speech system, whatever, perhaps they did release a second version later. I lost my original copy, but if you or anyone you know would happen to have a copy of Mastertronic's Five-A-Side Soccer, I'd love it if you tried it in case you happen to have a version of it with the Here We Go song. As an aside, Ken Grant really got a lot of mileage out of this game, because not only did he release Five-A-Side Football in Europe, Five-A-Side Soccer in North America, and perhaps multiple versions, this game is actually based on a previous release of his called Slapshot Hockey, and really, Five-A-Side Indoor Soccer is virtually the same as hockey when you think about it. Except for the sticks and the ice and stuff. So Slapshot Hockey he made, I think, first back in 1984, but it had no AI. It was just a 2-player game. So then he made a game called International Hockey, almost exactly the same game, but with AI, if you can call it that. I mean, it's kind of terrible, but, you can play against the computer. So maybe I'll show a little bit of footage of those. That same engine got totally reused for Five-A-Side, with the obvious differences of changing it from 3 periods down to 2 halves, changing the graphics from these kind of hunchbacked, shuffling skaters to these soccer or football players. So well done, Ken Grant, really milking that same bit of programming for all it's worth.
He scores!
I'm sure there'll be comments about how I'm calling it soccer, and I should call it football. Did you know that the name soccer actually comes from England? The official name for the sport is association football, and that word association, SOC, got shortened in England to soccer. For quite a while, that was a perfectly acceptable name for the sport in England. And of course, in other countries, we already had football, Canadian football, there's American gridiron football, Australia has Aussie rules football. So in these countries, instead of calling it football, we called it soccer. But we didn't make up the name. It came from England. Okay, so all that I suppose was a preamble, but okay, so I'm back in my hacked version, the Here We Go fake Mastertronic version that I hope is reality. But what I want to do is improve it. I want to make it so the Here We Go song can be skipped by pressing the fire button during the kickoff. And then I'll have kind of literally the game of my dreams, the Mastertronic version that sings Here We Go, but I can skip it anytime I want. Okay, so let's try and do that. So I've got my Super Snapshot cartridge plugged in back here. I'll start a game. And what we'll do is, while the song is singing, I've frozen the game with the Super Snapshot, and we'll go into the monitor, and we see that the program counter here is at 9984 hex. So I strongly suspect that that is the heart of the sample playback routine that's singing this song. So let's disassemble around there. So right now it's at this 84, and we see some registers here. This is a timer register, that's promising. Oh, and here's a SID register right, D404. So yeah, this looks very promising. This is undoubtedly, well, in fact, I know it is, because I did some research before I started recording this. This is the playback routine. We could try to learn about it in general, and specifically I'm going to try and modify it so we can cancel out of the playback by pressing fire button. So the playback routine actually starts back at 9900 hex, and there's three major components. There's the initialization, there's the playback, and then there's the cleanup at the end. We'll identify those three parts. I'll just give a quick tour of what I figured out. So interrupts are disabled during the digi playback. You might notice that the whole game seems frozen whenever a sample is played back, like when the song during the kickoff. There's no animation, so all interrupts are frozen. The A register is stored here in 97 hex. When this routine is called, the A register is loaded with the sample number, the sound number that they want to play. And actually it only has 3 sounds available: the song, the he scores, and a very rare foul or penalty sample. So that's stored for later. And then this next bit just initializes, this is the SID register. If you see a 16-bit address starting with D4, you know that's related to the SID, to the sound interface device. So this just initializes it. And this is just backing up some 0-page pointers, which I presume are used elsewhere in the game. They're needed for the sample playback. So they're just pushed on the stack temporarily, and then they'll be pulled back off after we're done as part of the cleanup. Then the kernel ROM is switched out, so there is RAM underneath by modifying location 1, and that's because the sample data is actually stored up in that RAM under the kernel. Now this particular byte from under the kernel is stored in 997C. This is a bit of self-modifying code, and I believe this is the sample playback rate, just an 8-bit number. The smaller the number, the slower the playback. Or I suspect that this is something that could be chosen when the digis, or the samples, when the digitized sounds are created, sort of like a bit rate in MP3s. So that's pulled out of the module, and I suppose if this was done correctly, all these sounds could be replaced with another pack of samples, and the code could remain unchanged. Okay, and then we're going to pull back the sample number and arithmetically shift left, that is multiply it by 2 twice, so multiply it by 4, transfer into the index register, and now there's a bunch of lookup tables, and every sample has a 4-byte entry. The first 2 are the location in RAM where the sample starts, and then the location in RAM where the sample ends. And we can look at that table now. It's here at E1000, so to speak. So the sample starts at E1, 4B, it's in high byte, low byte format, and the sample ends at F9, 33. So you can see they've used up, out of the 8K of RAM available under the kernel, they've used about 6 of it on that terrible song. And then the next sample starts at F934, which is just 1 byte after the previous one ended. And here's the ending address. And here's another entry. And this fourth one looks like an entry, but it actually isn't. It doesn't start till FFDA, and the end address is before it. I don't know if they were going to have a 4th sample and found they were out of room or what. Okay, so that's the table. So basically, we configure the player based on what sample number we want to play. And then a bit more initialization. Here we're setting the pulse waveform width to FF, which is the maximum. It's actually only a 12-bit number, so 4 bits of this is ignored, but I guess it doesn't really matter. And then also they're setting the timer. They're latching the timer here at DD 0, 4, and 5 of the 16-bit counter. And it's going to count the number of cycles, and it's used for timing for the sample playback. And just clearing the Y register for later. D406 is setting the voice 1 sustain to F is the maximum and the release of 0. And then writing a 1-1 hex into the CIA number 2 control register starts that timer counting down from FFFF. Okay, and now the initialization is done. We're going to jump into the main playback loop, which we'll see in a little bit. So it jumps in midway, but we're going to start here. So I'm going to scroll down. So this is the playback loop. FB and FC form a 16-bit pointer to the current sample data. So they're just incremented, the low byte, and if necessary, the high byte. And then the current pointer is compared against this F7 and F8, which is the end address. And if they're equal, then we'll jump to 99B7. That means playback is over, and we'll jump to the cleanup routine. Okay, but that's not the case yet. Next, we're loading the A register with 8 for the number of bits we want to play back, and storing that in a 0-page location as a counter to keep track of how many bits we've played. And now we're going to actually load the current sample, but it's not an 8-bit sample. It's actually 8 1-bit samples. This is just a 1-bit player, I believe. So it's actually loading in 8 samples at once. That's why there's this counter here. And it's storing all 8 samples, 8 1-bit samples in this location in zero page FE for later access. And now we have a little loop that just checks the timer register that's counting down and comparing it with 80. And this is actually that self-modifying code that we saw earlier, the sample speed. So DD04 starts off at FF, but every machine cycle, it's going to be counting down automatically. The hardware does that for you. And we're polling it. This actually doesn't seem like a good way to do it. It seems to me that they should be using like NMI, like interrupts, or some other way of doing this. But anyway, this is how they've chosen to do it. So they're just pulling this register and waiting for it to count down to 80 or whatever sample playback speed was chosen up above. It's the self-modifying code I mentioned. So every 128 machine cycles, a sample is going to be played back. So if my math is right, that's somewhere around 7 or 8 kilohertz. But because of the nature of this polling, there's going to be a fair bit of variation, several cycles, which probably contributes to the noisiness of those samples, the scratchiness. And there's also a bit of overhead too, because this is going to take, 4 cycles here, I think 3 and another 3. So you have like 10 cycles of variance here. And then once the countdown has reached the correct point, then another write is done into the CIA to restart that timer. But even this takes, another 6 or whatever cycles. So there's a fair bit of play possible in there. So if it's important to you to be more accurate, you're welcome to do the math here yourself. Count it out cycle by cycle, but this is generally what's happening. Okay, now we've waited long enough. It's time to finally play a sample. We're going to shift the high bit out, and we're going to check, is it clear? If so, branch ahead to here. If it's not clear, it's just going to fall through here, and then branch ahead. So the effect is either we're going to load 4-9 hex or 4-1 into the A register, and either way it's going to be written into D404, which will enable or disable the pulse waveform. Bit 3 is the only difference here. 4-1 means that we are gating or starting a pulse waveform. The difference is setting bit 3 here, that is adding 8, which disables that voice. So I think the effect here is we have a pulse waveform that's always on full duty cycle, cutting it down to 0. I'm not sure this is the best way of doing it, but again, this is how they've chosen to do it. So basically you just have a pulse or square waveform. So either you've just got a continuous high or a high low. So that's actually doing the write, that's generating the sound. This is the heart of the playback routine. Then we're going to decrement 96, which is that counter that we set to 8. Now it's going to go from 8 to 7. And if it's not equal, we're just going to loop back up here. And all 8 bits are going to be played through, shifted out, and then played after the appropriate delay here, watching the timer in CIA number 2. Once we played all 8 bits, then we're going to decrement F9, which actually I don't think has even been initialized yet, but it will be later. So the first time through, it might actually not play the right number of samples, but whatever. It seems to play groups of 16. So once this will be initialized to 16, and then counts down 15, 14, and again, it will loop up and get a new byte worth of bits, another 8 1-bit samples. And once a whole group have been played, we again increment the sample pointer, the 16-bit, the low 8, and then the high 8, and load it in. We check is equal to 10 hex. If it's less than 10 or 16 decimal, so 0 to F hex, then we just jump ahead. But otherwise, we cap it at F. And then we subtract FD. And actually, this is all kind of goofy. I went through here and I didn't see where FD is set, but it seems to cycle through 0, 8, 10, 18, or 20 hex. That is 0, 8, 16, 24, or 32 decimal. It subtracts that value and then it branches. The bizarre thing, it either ends up here at 99AE or 99B0. But you see, these are two loads in a row. And if it did happen to load this, well then A is just immediately overwritten. So I thought this was really weird. And I did a bunch of digging into this and finally realized, back in the soccer stadium, it says Voicemaster up on the left part of the arena when the camera's over on the left side. Well, Voicemaster was a sound interface available for the Apple and for the Commodore 64. So I thought maybe they made these voice samples with Voicemaster. And I took a bit of digging, but I found the D64 of the Voicemaster software. And digging around that, I found an almost identical playback routine to this. I don't want to disassemble that whole thing, but I guess I'll show it on screen. And it's almost identical, but between these two things, the original Voicemaster playback routine has a store A at D418, which is the volume register of the SID. So it's like the original program would actually have every 15 or 16 bytes, it would have a special control or volume register, and that's being removed. But the dumb thing is, that's the whole point of this whole section of code, starting like here, loading it in, this comparison, this subtraction, all this code, its only purpose is to do that right to D418. It took me a while. I actually hacked this back to the original routine, and all it does is plays back really a lot quieter than before. So I guess they didn't like how it was so quiet, so they hacked it out, but they left most of the code in. It's completely unnecessary. And then this is here where, we just reset to 10 hex or 16 decimal, which is the number of bytes to loop through before doing this useless calculation. And in the original Voicemaster, it actually is 0F there, but here it's 10. I don't know why. I tried changing that to F and it actually just makes the sound even worse, even more distorted. I guess because it's playing those control bytes back as digital data. Okay, and we've reached the end of the playback loop, 995B. Jumps way back up to that top. Okay, so that's the main loop. And then this last part here is just the cleanup. Again, I don't know, that seems like an unnecessary load A with 0. Here they're just saying the kernel ROM back into memory, restoring those 0 page addresses from the stack, again initializing the SID, and saying the SID volume back up to full, clearing the interrupt disable, and returning to the game. So now that we have a basic understanding of this sample playback routine, we know that this is the exit, 99B7. So basically, we want to find a place during sample playback where we can read the joystick button, and if it's pressed, we want to prematurely jump ahead to this 99B7. Now, normally, it would be a challenge to find a place to read the joystick. We need a bit of room for that, and we'd have to find some memory to patch and jump to it and all that kind of stuff. But as part of this analysis, we found out there's a whole bunch of useless code right around here. So that's where we're going to put our little patch. So I found that it is necessary to still advance this byte. So those bytes are necessary. But right here from 999F, we don't actually need to read the byte, compare it, or do this math. And then here at 99B0, we do need to set F9. So basically, we can fill from 999F to 99AF, and we're going to fill that with the EA byte, which means NOP, no operation. And we'll look at what we've done to this poor thing. Okay, so all those NOPs, was that 16, 17 of them, are now ours for the using. So we're just going to assemble here at 999F. We're just going to load in the joystick port 2 value. We're going to AND it with 10 hex. That 1 is the fire button bit. And then we're just going to branch. If it's equal to 0, if that bit is 0, that means it's held down. We're going to go to 99B7, which, as discussed, is the exit, the cleanup routine. So again, just to look at the code here. So here's our little patch. Still a lot of bytes free. And if the fire button's pressed, we're going to branch ahead to 99B7, which is the exit. Okay. Do you think he'll work? Let's exit. And we'll resume the game. Okay. I didn't try to do it that one that was in progress. Okay, scoring myself. Oh. Okay, here we go. Moment of truth. Woo! We can skip that terrible song. Oh, can't score an own goal. There we go. So good. See how you just can't... The guy's all by himself there. Oh, I made a save. Stupid goalie. The keeper. Okay. Well, you get the idea. So I'm pretty excited to finally be able to play this game the way I dreamed it, better. Does that make sense? While I was doing the research for this video, it was amazing how many little bunny trails and weird connections there were between the different versions. The Voicemaster. In fact, I think some versions of this game even just do away with the 1-bit pulse digis and instead just use regular D418, just writing to the volume register and clicking it. Some seem to use that, but then that won't work as good on the 64C. But those are all other diversions. This episode could have gone all kinds of places. So I tried to keep it focused. It's probably plenty long enough already. Okay, thanks very much to my patrons for their support. Thanks to Dawn, again, for the 5-a-side soccer. Again, if you have a copy of Mastertronic 5-a-side soccer, load that up, and if it has the Here We Go song, I want an image of that, so I know that my memory is not faulty. All right, thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time. Here we go, here we go, here we go. Here we go, here we go, here we go.